Today we are going to talk a little bit about the work we've recently done for the luxury fashion brand Fenty. First, a little bit about
Any
who we are.
Riri fans in the audience there?
Yeah? Good.
One.
So first, a little bit about who we are. To my left, I have Suchi. She's an amazing creative, also DJ, originally from Oslo, Norway, and then now in New York.
Yeah, and Pete over here, he hails from the Netherlands. He's the art director, I'm the copywriter. We both moved to London where we worked at BReel together and partnered up as a team. We're now at BReel New York. But over at BReel in London, we worked on a number of clients, including Nike, Converse, Loro Piana, and the virtual band Gorillaz. And before we dive into Fenty and what we did for Fenty, we want to talk a little bit about BReel, who we are, and the type of work we do. So BReel started out by 5 Swedes with a film and tech background. And they came together in 1999 to leverage the potential that the internet gave us to tell stories. And it's been 20 years, and this is essentially what we're still doing. But only this time, we're across 5 offices in Europe and in the US. And yeah, we're about 120 staff. And in terms of the work we do, it pretty much spans across all segments. But we tend to have a focus on technology, entertainment, and fashion. Because these are all major cultural touch points where we really feel we can flex our unique ability to leverage technology and then storytelling to connect audiences, but also help bring brands into a more modern conversation. So, you know, before we dive into Fenty, we want to show you 2 pieces of work, specifically that we've done within fashion, that shows you how we've helped bring them into culture. You know, BReel, we do all kinds of stuff from mixed reality to installation pieces, from strategy, branding. But these 2 pieces of work are relevant in terms of Fenty because they essentially resulted in LVMH and Rihanna to handpick BReel in terms of helping them launch Fenty as a modern day brand.
Yeah, so we've been working with the big corporation LVMH for a very long time. And back in 2016, they asked us to help them reposition and sort of reimagine the Berluti brand. And Berluti is quite an old brand, but a beautiful brand that makes really beautiful products. And if you know, like if you shop in luxury and you go to a luxury store, the amazing thing that you find is that you go into the store and have this beautiful experience, right? You can see these beautiful products, you can touch them, you can feel them. So when they asked us to take over their digital e-commerce platform and look at their digital branding, we came up with this, we walked into this challenge. And the challenge is that when you are looking at luxury brands, it's always hard to maintain this sort of luxurious experience that you have in the physical retail and then transform that into your digital space, because you don't have that same connection that you have in the physical space. So we collaborated very closely with them and tried to figure out how we could do this perfectly. So what we started with was to basically take a look at their lookbooks. And normally, if you know a little bit about fashion, you know that lookbooks are very much about showing the garments in its simplest form and telling the story of that sort of release or that sort of season. So what we did here was look at, let's create these lookbooks, but at the same time, tell the story you've been told in store. And that's your heritage story, that's your craft story, that's the story of the brand. So here you see how we adapted the lookbooks into really beautiful editorial pieces that then sort of tell the story of the brand. And secondly, we looked at how we reveal products. And our products on the website, for a luxury brand especially, need to be very immersive in a way I can touch them, I can see them, and I can almost like experience them up close to see all this detail and craft that goes into making one of these. So we also looked at, you know, how can we display these really beautiful big pictures of the products so that you can really see the detail and the craft that goes into them, into producing these beautiful products.
Yeah, and another example of work that we did is with H&M. We've been partnering with H&M for about 12 years now. But over the past 4 years, we've been helping them out with their designer collabs. So from Alexander Wang to Kenzo to Erdem. And our latest campaign was for Moschino. And in this case, it wasn't so much about helping to modernize H&M because they didn't really need that. It was more around how do we help them tell their story to more people. So what we essentially did for Moschino was that we came up with an idea that we called Moschino TV, where we essentially hacked Instagram to recreate this culture of zapping between TV channels as you do when you're watching cable TV. And how this essentially worked was we had a whole range of influencers that we could leverage. So each influencer would post a bespoke piece of video content or a still content, which invited you into this crazy, colorful world of Jeremy Scott, and also showcased each piece of the collection. Now, at the end of the video, you might see it in one of these examples, there's a little like swipe animation that says swipe to switch channel. So when you swipe the carousel, you would end on a new post with a tag. When you click the tag, it switched your channel, and you landed on a new piece of influencer content, all living within the same world of Jeremy Scott and his colorful, crazy collection. And what this did was we essentially created this rabbit hole of content which ultimately led you to the Moschino and H&M official collection page where you could purchase the pieces. And to us, it was just really exciting and interesting to see how we can leverage something so commonly used within fashion, especially like Instagram and a ton of influencers, but to use it in a way that really told a connected story through this like wide web of influencers. And this chain reaction ultimately racked up over 4 billion impressions, which was really, really like mind-blowing to us to see because it snowballed so fast. But yeah, we were just happy that we could connect narrative to something as commonly used as Instagram. Which leads us on to Fenty. So based on the work that we did with Berluti and H&M, Rihanna and her team approached BReel to help launch Fenty into the world as a modern-day fashion luxury brand. And just a little bit of a background, like LVMH hasn't launched a fashion house in 32 years. The last fashion house it launched was in 1987. So we had to kind of take a step back and just kind of relook at the whole consumer landscape, especially how people are actually purchasing fashion nowadays, because right now it's completely unrecognizable based on their old models. So to us, when we took on the brief as designers and creatives, we had to adopt an entirely new approach to designing an e-commerce website.
Yeah. So we looked at the modern fashion day consumer, and this is the consumer that also shops in non-luxury brands, also in luxury brands. So we looked at the whole sort of spread of it. And what we noticed is that there's two really important things that have changed over the years. The first thing is that we are shopping on our terms. And what we mean by that is that we shop when we want, where we want, from whenever, from where we want. And in a way that is like, what I mean by that is that we can shop at a shop that isn't based in our city. It's somewhere else, and it can deliver to our doorstep. So in a way, these stores, instead of us going to these stores are now coming to us. And that is interesting because you see that already that the physical stores like Barney's and Forever 21 are now struggling with this concept because they're not able to adapt quick enough to this change. They're struggling to maintain their retail stores. Maybe their online stores will thrive, but their retail stores are suffering. You see brands like Net-a-Porter, Farfetch, and Fashion Nova thrive because of their ability to adapt to this change in consumer behavior. And that's what we look at, like how are consumers changing their behavior, and then how do we adapt to that as designers and creatives. The second point I like to bring up is that our runway is social media. And in a way, also, social media is our runway. Like, we use social media to find our trends. We search social media to find the next look that we want to purchase. And also then, when we purchase that, we show it off. And that's where we get other people inspired by our looks. The beauty of that also is that then, at that point, you can see most of the time which brand that is, because people hashtag it or tag the picture in itself. Some brands even add little buy it now buttons on there, so you can instantly purchase it. And this all makes that whole idea of going to a physical store useless in a way. So these points show that the habits of our consumers of today are changing, but also show that the consumers of the future are going to be even more changed. So we as designers and creatives and as brands should really change with them. Yeah, so just kind of understanding how the consumer landscape had changed,
it was obviously important for Fenty to launch as a digital-first brand. Something that truly went beyond this idea of a physical, kind of conventional store, and especially like a physical flagship store. So to us, the solution was pretty much right in front of us. It was the internet. So why not launch a high-end luxury flagship store digitally, and digitally only? So that was essentially the challenge we set ourselves. And as their only digital flagship store, we had to make sure it was the ultimate destination where the story of Fenty, the craft and the quality behind each of the pieces, and a seamless e-commerce experience all came together to create a whole new luxury shopping experience, but for a modern consumer. So we're going to talk a little bit about Fenty, because Fenty is still a pretty fresh new brand. Not a lot of you might know what Fenty is about. But when Rihanna approached us, she had a little bit of a manifesto that she came to us with, which was to inspire, to empower, to clash, and to include. And at every virtual touch points, from branding to the design, all the way to the shopping experience, we had to make sure that all these points were accurately conveyed. So the challenge we had was, how do we give consumers a really strong sense of the brand and what it really stands for? And also just a couple of things about Fenty and how it's already breaking a lot of conventions in terms of luxury fashion. Beyond not having any physical stores, Fenty also does not design around seasons at all. Instead, there's sort of like a random drop of releases, which can just happen at any time. And to us, this was really interesting because it's almost like you're kind of keeping your customers on their toes, and it's a little bit of an urge to kind of check back on the site in case you missed a release or missed a drop or missed a piece of item, a piece of clothing. Another thing that Fenty does differently is that Rihanna was very adamant that she didn't want to depict a look. She didn't want Fenty to give you the option to shop the look. It was all meant to be reinterpreted in your own way, and she wanted the consumers and her audience to feel like really free-spirited and invented about how they wear her pieces. So we had to translate all of these things onto the website somehow, and we're going to touch on that a little bit later in terms of how we did that. So all in all, when Fenty came to us, we had to make sure that this unique brand vision came to life in the most innovative and unexpected way, because this brand is, by nature daring, and so must its flagship store be. So together with her and her team and her stylist, we worked quite closely together, and we feel like we got to a really beautiful and exciting end product that also felt really true to her vision.
Yeah, and this is the website as it is now. This is how it launched. Here you see the three drops that have been released since the launch. And what you instantly see is that this is like an always moving, sort of always on kind of feeling, right? This is a big loop of all these images, and it kind of represents what the brand is doing. It's trying to always reinvent, it's always on the move and releasing new things. And it also shows the background image and the hero image complement each other in a way it tells the story of the release. So if the next slide, you'll see that this first release was all to do, was a visual homage to the American photographer Kawemi Braithwaite and the Grandessa models. And then this was more a sort of exploration of the themes of sisterhood. And here we see a theme that was to do with her background in Barbados and sort of a vacation look. So to tell you more about this design process that we went through, we kind of always went back to this one question that we had, and that came from this whole idea that Instagram is so important in our lives and it's where we almost shop. That how do we design a website when even websites are getting out of fashion? And it's a very, very interesting sort of statement to see, because it's something that we all sort of start struggling with. Like, people do not want to go to websites anymore because there's a mobile phone with apps on there that we can all shop from. So why do we do that, right? So we'd like to take you to 5 key learnings that we took, how to make that website still exciting, and it's still a great place to tell the story of your brand and to show off the products that you have. The first point I like to make is that, and this is for me a very obvious one to most of us because we're all in this design world together, but some brands still see digital branding the same as your offline branding. And what we tried to do here is that we looked at the digital branding and really made that a way to tell our story. So the logo, of course, doesn't have to be still. It can be moving and therefore explain more of what the vision and the idea of the brand is. So here, together with the branding agency Commission Studio, we created this ticker design. And the ticker, what it does is actually, it's a device to tell the story of the brand in the simplest form. It's kind of like this news headline, always giving you a new latest update on the next release that Rihanna is going to bring out with Fenty. And what we then did is that we rolled this out through the site. So you see it here on the landing page on mobile, the release ticker is giving you like that news headline feel. Then on the product release pages, you almost get tied into this like little button at the bottom, going like, see our products, see our products, see our products, really driving you to that. On actual product imagery, we have like a shop it ticker. And then eventually, even on the product PDP page, we would have a bag it button. And here it's also very clear that we didn't stick with the rules of like it has to be a buy it now or buy it button. No, we went for bag it, because this is a brand with a bit of an attitude and we can change this. It's also something that you have to consider if you're selling stuff that are so expensive that your decision isn't driven by the button, you can play with that. We found that like if you're selling goods that are like $10, you probably have to make a very clear buy it button. But if it's a good that's like over $1,000, you can probably play with that, because that's not the decision that's going to be made on that button.
Yeah, and another quite important thing that we wanted to kind of push through the site was having a sense of a really connected narrative. Because chances are you'll probably see a piece of clothing with a little bit of a story around it and some sort of context around it. And we had to make sure that the story and the context and the narrative all flow through every touch point of the way. So from an Instagram story, then onto the release page, all the way down to the PDP product page, this connected narrative had to flow through all the way. So just as an example here, you see a story on Instagram, and then that would then lead you onto the release page on Fenty's site. And as you sort of scroll down, the narrative sort of slowly starts to unfold. And we all made sure that there was some beautiful editorial photography. Obviously, the narrative came through the text as well. But one thing we really focused on was the fact that you had the chance to browse the individual products within the narrative as well. So you'll see an example here shortly where you can click on the photo and you start seeing each individual piece within that editorial that then leads you directly to the PDP page. So the importance here was don't make the product browsing experience and the narrative two siloed elements. Make sure you can almost harmoniously merge them into one fluid motion.
Yeah, and then also another thing we looked at was this idea of the familiar habits of our audience. Like our shopping behavior is increasingly inspired by the stories and stories told and stories we see on Instagram. So we really got that platform to mimic that in a way that when you go from Instagram to our website, you would then have a seamless transition. And you see that really easily in the homepage, right? The homepage is kind of like Instagram stories in a way that it tells each of these releases, like with even the Instagram timer. It really copies that sort of same behavior and same habit that the user is familiar to. We also looked at how we tend to scroll very long pages, but like only one image at a time, similar to how Instagram works. We sort of looked at that and then added some interesting carousels on it, so that's like not a striped carousel, but it's actually rotating. And then finally, Suchi just touched on this, each of these images should be shoppable. Similar to Instagram, you can tag an image. Here we added shoppable buttons on there, so you can shop instantly with an accessory or a dress. So it's all basically finding these familiar habits that your user has and copying them or being inspired by them and using them in your own design.
Yeah, and this is another one that we touched on earlier, which we're calling the look is yours. Just to recap a little bit, Rihanna was very adamant that she didn't want to depict a certain look. Instead, we were trying to see how we can inspire people to adopt that same confident and free-spirited attitude that she often has to her own sense of dressing and her own sense of style. So what we essentially did was we created this interactive slider tool, which showed you how you could wear certain pieces in your collection in multiple ways. And what we also wanted it to feel like was this sort of sense of meeting a personal stylist when you walk into a luxury flagship store, something or someone that really kind of inspires you to be a little bit more inventive and creative with the pieces, and making sure it feels part of your own unique sense of style.
Yeah, and then finally, we looked at how you can be inspired beyond this flagship store. So here what we did was we created an app, and that was an app just for Rihanna. So it's only installed on one phone around the world. It's her phone. And whenever she wants to make an Instagram story that features some sort of brand story about the Fenty brand, she can just write a little annotation that will be a ticker. So the app will create a ticker on her video, on her image. And then when she submits that story to Instagram, she uploads it to Instagram, that ticker, only the ticker, will be then added to the Giphy library, which then means that if you are a user and you want to be part of the brand, part of the community, you can then search that the Giphy functionality or the GIF functionality on Instagram and find that same ticker and use it on your own story. And this really made the ticker like much more of just a visual beacon for the brand. It created a community of culture and conversation around the brand. And it really enhanced that idea of the red thread that brought this brand from like the start of the site when you see that one ticker all the way down to the users and the consumers using that ticker on their own social channels.
Yeah, and sort of just to conclude and take a little bit of a step back, you know, looking at how the consumer landscape has changed, especially within fashion and luxury fashion, the physical brick and mortar stores hit its peak last century, whereas the idea of a digital flagship store we feel has yet to hit its full potential. You know, but we believe with Fenty we're already starting to deliver on that promise bit by bit. It's still early days, but it's all through a carefully constructed brand story and a seamless e-commerce experience. We feel like Fenty is kind of already starting to lead lead luxury fashion brands into a more modern age. And to us, just kind of working on this from scratch, it was really interesting because we had to do a lot of reflection as creators and designers. To us, building a modern brand or a modern website even is all about adaptation. So to us, it was all about adapting to new mindsets, to new behaviors, and to new cultures. And it was, personally for us, it was about just letting go of all the rigid structures that we were so used to working against, and just really looking at what makes the modern consumer really tick. So, to us as designers, technologists, and I think creators and storytellers in this room, maybe it's not so much about asking yourself, is this right, or does this feel right? Maybe it's more about asking yourself, is this relevant?
Thank you. That was it.